Hello listeners, this talk is in response to MrCool mug, who asked me the following two questions. What do you think of binary options trading? Do you think it's a good idea for your average Joe? Thank you for those two questions, MrCool mug. Before I offer my opinion on binary options trading, I'm going to explain what binary options trading is, because I assume the majority of people listening to this have probably never heard of this term, let alone actually understand it. So binary options are financial instruments. For reasons that will become apparent later in this talk, I wouldn't call them investments. So they're financial instruments, and they're essentially a bet. They work as a bet on something as to what the price of that something will be at a particular time. And that something could be a particular stock. It could be an index of stocks, which is just a grouping of stocks. It could be a commodity, so oil, copper, wheat, whatever. Or it could be a foreign exchange. But it's a particular thing, and you predict what the price of that will be at a particular time. They have an expiry date and time, and that can be anywhere from minutes to months. So basically you predict the price of something, and then that bet is resolved at the expiry date and time. So, in 1 hour, or next week at, next Friday at 5 o'clock or something like that. And then there is what's called a strike price, and the strike price is the relevant price upon which people bet. So they predict that the actual price of the thing upon which they're betting will be above or below that strike price upon expiry. So if they predict it will be higher, then that's called a call. If they predict that it will be lower, that's called a put. So you buy a call or a put. You're basically predicting whether you'll be above or below the strike price, or the thing upon which you're betting will be above or below the strike price, hence the word binary in binary options. So how they work is the following. If the person who buys the binary option is successful, then they receive a fixed return, regardless of what the actual price was. So, for instance, if they predicted that if they bought a strike price at $1, so they would be predicting that it would be more than $1. So it doesn't matter whether it's 5 cents more than $1, or whether it's $373 more than $1, or whatever. It doesn't matter upon the magnitude, just that they're on the correct side of the strike price. And likewise, if they predicted lower. So they receive a fixed return, and they also receive the money back that they spent on the binary option. So they get the money back plus a return. If they are unsuccessful, then the money they spent on buying that binary option is lost. And the return is always less than the risk. So, for instance, if the binary option were $1, the return would be less than $1. So it might be 70 cents, for instance. So if they were correct, they would get their $1 back plus an additional 70 cents. If they were incorrect, they would lose $1. So that $1 is more than the 70 cents, obviously. Now, if the actual price is exactly the same as the strike price, it will depend upon the particular rules of the contract, and those vary. Each contract is different. But commonly, the money that was spent on buying the binary option will be returned with nothing else. So you don't lose any money, you don't gain any money. You just get the original money back. And there may be a minimum or maximum requirement for the amount of money spent on each particular trade. Again, that varies from place to place and contract to contract and so on. And all of the details about the trade are disclosed at the outset. So the conditions of the strike price, the expiry, the payout, the risk, all of these things are disclosed in the outset, so everyone knows what they're getting themselves into, or should. It is important to note, though, that it's a trade. They're not actually buying the underlying thing that's being traded, which is kind of it sounds a little bit weird to some people, I know. But basically, think of it like this. If you go to a race course and you bet upon a particular horse in a particular race, you don't actually buy the horse. You're just betting on the performance of the horse. Think of it like that. So you're not buying the underlying asset. You're just making a prediction about where it's going to finish in terms of its price. So it's purely a bet upon the kind of the direction of the price. All right, so I'll give you an example because that maybe I have a few people confused already. So imagine this scenario: a company's shares are currently selling for $1 per share, and you think that an hour from now, those shares will be worth more than $1, or they'll be selling for more than $1. So you buy a binary option, in this case a call option, and the contract stipulates the following: the strike price is $1, the expiry is 1 hour from now, and let's say the return is 70%. So you buy 100 of these binary options at $1 each. So you stake $100, and if in an hour the price of that company's shares is more than $1, then you get your $100 back for the 100 that you bought, plus an additional $70 because the return was 70%. So you walk away with your original 100 plus an additional $70. If in an hour the price of the company's shares is less than $1, then you lose all of your $100. It doesn't matter whether the price is 99 cents or 0, 1 cent, 33 cents, whatever. As long as it's beneath the strike price, then you lose all of the money that you put up as a stake in buying those binary options. So that's basically what a binary option is. Now, what do I think about all of this, and do I think it's a good idea for the average Joe to engage in binary options trading? Let me first talk about at the bigger level, sort of philosophical, moral, whatever level. I don't really have an objection to it as long as there's the rule of law involved and everyone knows what he's getting into, as long as all of that's disclosed and people willingly do it and so on and so forth. If people want to gamble, that's fine by me. I mean, I don't... there are deleterious effects of people gambling, and I think as a society we need to address those to some extent. But people are probably always going to gamble. Sometimes it'll be behind closed doors and so on. You won't really be able to prevent people from gambling ever. You can't control people that much. So I guess at least have it out in the open and I don't know, educate people so they don't do this, they don't become addicted to gambling, that kind of thing. But I don't really have a problem with people gambling. If they want to go to a casino and throw away money, as long as it's theirs. If they want to go to a race course and throw away money, that's up to them. But as to whether I think this is a good idea for the average Joe, and I would include myself in that regard. I'm not a big player, so I'm an average Joe also. I think that gambling of any form is almost always a bad idea, unless you can somehow find an asymmetrical bet. They do occur occasionally. Only once in my life have I actually gambled, and that was when I found an asymmetrical bet and actually ended up, it was a raffle, and I ended up getting the first and third place. I did this whole calculation about how much the tickets were selling for, how many tickets had been sold, how much the prizes were worth, and then sort of effectively how much they should have been selling the tickets for, and I realized it was it was worth buying those tickets, and that's the only time I've ever gambled in life. Or financially gambled, I guess. I've never really understood the appeal of gambling. I've been to casinos. I've watched other people gamble, and it's always struck me as a profoundly absurd concept that you have you have a lot of fun by throwing your money away, often really quickly. I went to Las Vegas many years ago I had a friend at university who was American. He was an exchange student, and when I was traveling around the US, I met up with him, and he was having his 21st birthday. So he went to Las Vegas with his friends and his family and so on, and I watched them just blow through tons of money really quickly, and it didn't. I don't know. It doesn't look like much fun to lose $300. I watched these guys playing craps. I didn't really know how craps works, but I saw one of my friend's friends just blow through. I think it was $300 in about 5 minutes playing craps. And when I say $300, this was back in the late 90s. So it's, $300 was a lot more then than it is now. And I just thought that doesn't look like much fun to me to just throw away $300. There are a lot of other things I could spend $300 on. So I don't think gambling is a good idea, especially when you gamble against the house. And I know some people are going to say to me, well, I've been binary options trading for 20 years and I've made a ton of money from it. Yeah, but a lot of people haven't. For every person who has, there are a ton who haven't. It's just like at the casino when we were in Las Vegas, they had all these pictures up on the wall, these huge pictures. And, there's a whole thing about the way they design casinos. So, there's no direct path to the exits. They don't have clocks on the walls, all these little tricks that they have. But they had all these pictures on the walls of these people grinning, these huge grins on their faces. Here's Fred Smith. He won, $410,000. Or, here's Sally Jones. She won $250,000. And these guys holding these enormous checks, grinning. But what they don't show you is that for every guy like Fred Smith or Sally Jones, there are another X number of people, and they're always more, or they've spent more than those other guys won. They don't show you those guys walking away with a frown on their faces, right? They just show you Fred Smith and Sally Jones with a big grin and a big check, that kind of thing. Whenever you're betting against the house, and by house, in terms of investing or playing the stock market or whatever, there are these enormous organizations that employ large numbers of people, and they have supercomputers and all this sort of stuff. You're more or less betting against the house if you're going to play their game. So, whenever you bet against the house, you're not going to do well. Occasionally someone will do well, but over the long term, the house always wins. So not a good option. And binary options trading really is gambling because it involves predicting a movement and a trend. And when you really get down to it, when you get down to brass tacks, any prediction that you make is ultimately going to be based upon a feeling or a hunch, if you're making a short-term prediction. Because, well, there's a very good saying. This comes from Benjamin Graham, and Benjamin Graham taught Warren Buffett. And Benjamin Graham is the granddaddy, the founder of a system of investing, a philosophy of investing called value investing. And he said that in the short run, the market is a voting machine, but in the long run, it is a weighing machine. So what that means is that in the short term, the actual price of a particular thing, a stock, for instance, may have absolutely nothing to do with what that company of which the share is a part is actually doing, whether they're making money or losing money. It's purely upon a feeling, and all these people out there who get a particular feeling about that share, and they say it's going to go up or it's going to go down, and they buy or sell, but it's purely a feeling. It's the psychology of crowds and so on. In the long run, though, things will eventually sort themselves out. But that's in the long run, hence why it's called a weighing machine, because eventually it weighs whether it's heavy or light, good or bad, valuable or not valuable, and so on and so forth. And so, if you're going to make a prediction about what something is going to do in the next hour or the next day, how do you make that prediction, really? Because there's a whole lot of stuff in there to do with the psychology of crowds and even events over which you may have absolutely no control or even ability to predict those events. There's that famous line from Yogi Berra, He said, I don't like to make predictions, especially about the future. And I think that is doubly true for the short term. I mean, you can do a fundamental analysis of a particular company and its shares, and you can estimate what, and the important word there is estimate, what you think a company is worth and thus what its shares are worth. I mean, you can do that. You could still be wrong, and Benjamin Graham goes into this whole thing about margin of safety and so on. And in the long term, the price of those shares should converge upon their underlying value. Of course, determining that value is difficult, but nevertheless, they should converge upon what a company is actually worth in the long term. I mean, if a company isn't making money, eventually that company should be worthless. In the short term, the shares won't necessarily reflect that. So look at some of these internet companies. I don't know how they actually make money, and some of them aren't making money. They're bleeding money, and yet people think their shares are worth something, and they're willing to pay a lot of money for them. In the long run, those companies are going to disappear. Likewise, companies that are steadily making money, some people may, in rare cases, you can actually find companies selling for less than what they're worth. Even if you liquidated the companies, sometimes they sell for less than what they're worth in the short term because people don't like that particular company for some reason. In the long term, these things sort themselves out. But when you're making a prediction about what the price of something is going to be an hour from now or next week, that's pretty difficult, actually. And this is true whether you're talking about a share or a commodity, an entire index, a national economy. Making very specific short-term predictions is a road or a recipe for disaster. It's a road to ruin. It's because it's pretty much impossible to predict what's going to happen, particularly events and the psychology of crowds in the short term. And of course, all of this even presupposes that in doing this, you're going to engage in the massive amount of work, whether it's reading, doing calculations, analysis, all of this sort of stuff, that's required to come to any real knowledge or understanding of the thing that you're betting upon. I mean, some people do make money from trading in various things, but think of it like this. If you were to go to the racetrack, some people will study the form guide and all of this sort of stuff, and they can still be wrong. But I mean, if you're just going to randomly pick a horse without even really knowing anything about that horse, you're just gambling, right? So to even have any inkling of what's going to happen, you have to do a lot of research, and that's a lot of work. If you're not going to do that, then you're basically just gambling. And this brings me to my broader point about what I think about binary options trading, and not just binary options trading. This is sort of a lesson for life, if you like. There's no simple way of doing anything in life. There's no easy, quick way to make money, whether it's in the stock market or in anything else. There's no quick way of making money, because otherwise everyone else would already be doing it. If you think you have found the secret to making a lot of money, the chances are that there are probably a lot of other people out there who have already found it before you. There are probably a lot of smarter people than you who have already found this magic system. And if everyone were to stumble upon this, and you might say, well, I'm not everyone. Okay, but as I said, the chances are a lot of other smart people have already found this, especially because there are these huge institutions that devote considerable resources to this. Then, by definition, the opportunity would have already passed. You have to think in life, if you can go through life understanding that you're not the smartest person in the room, then you're actually ahead of a lot of people. It's paradoxical, I know, but a lot of people out there think that they're the smartest person in the room. they can't all be the smartest person in the room. But if they're making decisions based upon the assumption that they are the smartest person in the room, and the person next to them is also making a decision based upon the assumption that he is the smartest person in the room, and so on and so forth, most of them are going to lose. If you can go into a situation understanding that you're probably not going to be the smartest person in the room and respond accordingly, then paradoxically that's actually going to stand you in good stead ahead of most people. So yes, people do make money from these things, but most people don't. Most people end up doing their shirts. And focusing upon the handful of winning gamblers, that's the age-old con that casinos play on people. There's a reason they have those gigantic photos on the wall of Fred Smith and Sally Jones holding their enormous checks for, what was it, for, I think 410,000 and 250,000. That's the age-old con, because they want you to think, hey, that guy looks like an ordinary guy. If he can do it, I can do it, That's the age-old con, right? Don't fall for the con. And what I would say is that anyone who tells you that they have a really simple, easy way to make quick money, whether it's in the stock market or anywhere else, is someone you should probably run a million miles from. Because why are they telling you that? That's their con on you. And there's that old adage that if you don't know who the sucker is, you're the sucker. Basically, if you're playing poker and you can't identify who the mark is, or the whale, I think is the term they use. If you don't know who the whale is, you're the whale, basically. So don't be the sucker, don't be the mark. And a lot of the way people make money from these systems is by selling you the system. Just come to my seminar. Pay me all this money to attend my seminar, and I'll divulge these secrets to you. Well, why would they do that, right? Why wouldn't they keep the secrets for themselves? But just pay me a bunch of money and come to my seminar, and I'll tell you how to make as much money as me. Well, I'll tell you how they made their money by getting you to buy tickets to their seminar, or by buying their books or CD set or whatever it is, right? That's how they make their money. Or the other way is they have this hot tip for you, and actually they've already bought it and they're selling it on to you. Not necessarily directly, they might go through a few other steps first. But they buy something and they play hot potato and throw you the hot potato, and now you have to throw it to someone else, right? That's how they make their money. And you should not listen to people who say, look, I have this simple system that anyone can do. Big flashing lights, big warning bells should be ringing, in your head, whenever anyone says that to you. And ditto with people who try to sell you exercise machines or dietary programs or supplements or whatever. You see these infomercials. I saw a few when I was in Australia recently. There's always these elaborate machines, and every year it's something even crazier, And the commercial always has testimonials from these people. I lost 13 kilos in 6 minutes ago. By doing 23 seconds of exercise. Once every 7 days. This kind of thing. If it were that simple, everyone would do it. Problem solved. Well, why there are all these fat people walking around out there, right? Because it's not that simple. Whether it's that or someone who has a get-rich-quick scheme for you, run a million miles away from that. Because there are only a few ways to make money in life. One is to make it yourself, over the long term, working for it, either in a job or running a business, or having to spend a lot of time and probably lose money and make mistakes along the way on that fairly steep learning curve in terms of investing for yourself. But that's a long-term process. Or if you have a certain amount of money, you can perhaps pay someone else to manage your money for you and pay them fees accordingly, and so on and so forth. But again, that's a long-term thing also. There's no short fix. There's no quick fix. There's no short-term solution to all of this. You either have to do the work yourself, and there is a lot of work involved, or you have to be willing to pay someone else, or you just have to do something like put money in an index fund and just sit on it for at least 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, right? and play the long game. So for the average Joe, I would say rather than looking for that particular quick fix, I would say there are some other things you can do. And I've mentioned some of these before in some previous talks. Firstly, invest directly in yourself via acquiring skills or qualifications. So you may actually have to spend money, acquiring those skills and time as well. But that money is probably going to be better invested than some sort of magic system, whether it's binary options trading or anything else. In the long term, you'll probably make more money. But the operative word there is long term. But invest in yourself in some way, including things like your health and so on as well. Another thing, tidy up loose spending and other inefficiencies. So cut down on your electricity bill or your heating bill or whatever by better insulating your house, that kind of thing. In the long term, you'll probably save more money with those, and they're considerably less risky than trying to find some magic bullet. Get out of debt. That is actually one really simple thing you can do. Although obviously you have to acquire the money to do so. That's the hard part. But get out of debt. In the long term, playing tight defense is probably going to be better than trying to be a star in offense. Warren Buffett says, don't lose money. That's rule number one. Rule number two, see rule number one. Don't lose money, basically. So rather than really concern yourself about a magic system, a magic bullet, or whatever, just play it conservatively by not losing money. And then index. So I've mentioned ETFs before, exchange traded funds. Just invest in some ETFs with very low fees, because the fees are usually what kill people when they're investing. Put some money in ETFs with very low fees for the long term. If you really want, you can diversify into some other things like precious metals and so on. But again, you're going to have to learn about those things and be in them for the long term. If you think that you're just going to go into anything and here's a magic system that's going to make you a ton of money in the short term, that's a really good way of doing your shirt. And this is true of life in general. There aren't really shortcuts. Be wary of people and things that claim otherwise. Pretty much can't go wrong with that, I think. So none of this is quick or easy. So I hope that this has been a good answer to you, Mr. Cool Mug. Don't look for quick solutions. And to everyone else, I know some of you may not be that interested in this kind of stuff, but as I've mentioned before, I think the one thing upon which those of us in neo-reaction or the alt-right or whatever can agree upon is that something is coming. There are going to be problems ahead. And it's necessary for us in particular, everyone else also, but us in particular, to really get all of our ducks in a row. And one of those ducks that we need to get in a row, one of the things that we need to get under control and sort out in our lives is money, finances, personal finances, investing and so on. We do need to sort these things out, get our ducks in a row. And so although this particular topic or broader topic is not necessarily interesting to people, and I know I haven't made one of these talks in a while because I know people tend to prefer the things where I talk about, Mohammedan civilizational collapse, rah-rah, that sort of thing. I know that's sort of like the comfort food for the alt-right. We do need to figure these issues out in terms of economics and finance. And you do need to start learning about these things because they will affect you, even if you don't want to take an interest in them. They will affect you. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to figure these things out. So hopefully this will motivate you to learn a little bit more about finance and investing and so on. I'll probably make some more of these kinds of talks in the future. If anyone has suggestions for these kinds of talks, because I like a bit of variety to in the talks I make, I like to discuss different topics. Please suggest some to me. Otherwise, as usual, please comment beneath this video. Thank you for listening.